I think if it was more internal, that a child being encouraged to use his or own curiosity
Yeah.
to discover what his or her passion really is, and then being encouraged to follow that passion.
Yeah.
And that's not being done in the school. So I think that's one of the areas where parents
Can
could
step
be
in.
working. Let kids try and fail.
Mm.
Let a kid follow a curiosity and interest. A lot of parents today are so afraid that their kids are not going to be the best. They just want them to succeed. And I think, failure is an important tool in learning. We
Yeah.
learn a lot more from our failures than we do from our successes.
Yeah.
And that I think children today are encouraged to only do what the parent, thinks, well, my child is going to be good at this, or it's one extreme or the other. The parent either is afraid of the child failing because the parent is not going to be looked upon as being a good parent, or it's the other extreme. It's do I want my child to really be the best he can be in his or her own mind, or do I want the child to be the best he could be in my
Yeah.
kind of mind, in society's kind of, viewpoint of.
See, there's some phrases you're saying in there too, Barbara, that I think are the important ones, right? With the parent on the micro level or the student, be the best student, be the best at what they are. Even before, when you were talking about the schools and the standards, that idea of like some aspects of standards are good, which they are because they allow us to improve and get better. And that's what I think about a lot. Again, philosophically, somewhat. To me, that's the root of this. That idea of getting better, because there's two dynamics to that which I think are relevant here. One is, firstly, how do you define better, right? And I think that's a really important one, as we've been talking about. What does success look like for an educational system? Is it being the top ranked school or the top ranked education system in the world? That seems fair, right? But even that, you say, well, how are we measuring that? What actually underpins that? Well, we have the most literacy. Okay, maybe that's right. Maybe we're highest. But even that, like, what about critical thinking? What about a passion for learning? What about instilling curiosity, right? So even that of how we define better becomes very nebulous. And how do
Yeah.
we even think about it? And it's subjective. But the other dynamic of better is this idea that we need to constantly be moving and changing, which is history, right? Right back to it. That's what
Yes.
history is. But I think that's something we need to question a little bit more, right? You mentioned, we've talked about the parallel here to the assembly line and all that. We can go back in history and remember a time where it was just artisans who were making things in their home on their own time, in their own schedule. And then we thought, like, hey, not an individual, but collectively, perhaps there's a way to do this better if we standardize it, if we teach people specific skills and we break it into factories, and we could do it quicker, and maybe the quality even goes up and the standards, right? But when we do that, what are we losing? What are we trading off? And I think there's been an implicit assumption for humans for much of human history, maybe all of it, that improvement is a good thing. We need to keep working towards that. And it is, logically. But there's a cost to it. And I think the school is a perfect example of that. All the things you've been articulating throughout this, standards, Common Core, testing, data, tracking, all that in theory is meant to make us better. But when you layer in those two dynamics of what does better mean, A, and B, what's the cost of us trying to get better? Because we can no longer become better at the scale we're at with those small schoolhouses that we had. It's like we almost have to make a decision. Like, do we really want to continue on this trajectory of constantly growing and improving? Or do we want to pump the brakes on that a little bit and think about what else might be an option? And it's tough though, because as you start to say that, people start to hear like, well, what are we talking about? Like, are we talking about socialism? Are we talking about where we shouldn't be striving for innovation and new things? And it's like, no, I don't think so, but I don't know. This is where it gets really tricky. So, bit of a word jumble there, but how does that play into how you think about it? Like, is it realistic and feasible for us to ever move away from that? Let's just keep trying to get better.
I think there has to be a balance.
Mm,
We have to balance one against the other, and I think we've gone way too far in the direction of the data, the standardization, the we are all the same,
Mm.
because we are not all the same. And as our society becomes more and more diverse, we have more and more difficulty convincing these individual groups that they all have to be the same, because they come from so many different cultures. They come from they have so many different traditions. They have so many different customs, so many different moral beliefs that we can't just lump them into this one clump.
But do you think it's
So
feasible though? Do you think we can actually do it where that balance you're saying that's what we should strive for? But is the reason we haven't achieved it, is there a choice in it, I guess? Can we actually make decisions that would allow us to strike that balance? Or is it actually inevitable? Like there's not actually a balance to be struck. In concept, there is, but in reality, we can never actually get there because there's just too much. There's too much we're trying to balance, and our human nature keeps pulling us towards, well, just do it this way.